So here's a story for you guys. There's a teen traveling in Malaysia with his family. He's prearranged an agreement with them where he's going to borrow some money from them because they're at a flea market here, and he's looking to buy some things, and he has his own money to spend, but it's not necessarily on him, which is probably smart for a teenager not to bring money across the sea. So he starts wandering around the flea market, right? And he comes across a really cool pair of sunglasses. Now let's note, he is spending his own money, so he's much more enticed to bargain and bring that price down when possible. So he starts asking the vendor about prices. They come to an agreement, and then he asks the vendor, can I go and get some money? I don't have it on me. I'm just going to go get it, come right back, and I'll make the purchase. The vendor says, yeah, of course, with this, I appreciate you asking. I'll be able to put these glasses aside for you, and nobody will get them, and they'll be here when you get back. The teen says, great, thank you. He goes, gets the money, comes back, makes the purchase, super easy. So now he's wandering around again. He's still in the flea market, and he comes across an awesome jersey vendor. Now he's a big soccer fan, so that's really what pulled him in. But he's still looking, and he's still bargaining on price because he is spending his money once again. So he takes that first jersey off the rack, asks about the price, has a little negotiation going on, takes a second one. On the third one, he could tell the vendor was getting a little upset. When he took that fourth jersey off the rack, the vendor erupted, starts interrogating the teen. Why are you asking so many questions? Do you even have any money on you? If you're not going to buy anything, you need to leave. You're wasting my time. The teen got really taken back. He tried to explain, I have money to spend. It's just not on me. But ultimately, he was so uncomfortable, he turned around and he walked away. You see, what the vendor didn't know was that fourth jersey was one that the teen was ready to buy. It was their exact team, player, and size that he was looking for. The problem here was that the seller's only interest was to sell. The teen was just another potential transaction. So when that egoism and that skepticism took over, the kindness and the helpfulness that was once there coming from the vendor was gone and out the window. You see, we're all going to interact with all sorts of people wherever we go in all sorts of ways, including tonight. The relationships that you've built along the way with your friends, your family, your colleagues, they're a reflection of your interests, your values, and your personal character. You've been building your own personal brand this whole time, and you might not have just known it yet. So let's talk about that word, right? Brand. To me, a brand is a promise. So that means that a personal brand could then be a personal promise. A promise of who you are and what people might be able to subconsciously expect when they hear your name or they see you passing by based on the actions that you've taken and the things that you've done leading up to today. So think to who you are and what you represent. What's your personal promise? So I love this graphic. It's far too real, and it's happened to me more times than I'd like to admit. The thing is, though, is we've all had that awkward first introduction or that hello. When it comes to the introductions, though, oftentimes you might find that it's hard, right? Because meeting new people and networking can really be hard. What is networking anyway? It can often feel insincere and fake, but it doesn't have to be. Meet new people with the intention of hearing this journey that they've taken to get to where they are today. Don't reach your hand out and shake theirs with the expectation that they have an offer letter in their back pocket waiting for you to sign. Learn from them. Identify some best practices. And then look to apply that toward finding yourself a job later on down the line if that time comes. With regard to jobs, LinkedIn, having a profile on LinkedIn has got to be one of the most important things these days with regard to our recruiting world that we are currently in. If you don't have one, you've got to get one. But for those of us that do have one, especially the students, how many of you guys might have found yourself rushing to get to this point? I see a couple heads nodding. It's a thing, right? It seems like getting as many connections as possible, building your network, reaching out, getting your name everywhere seems like the right way to use this platform, right? Wrong. And LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman agrees. His thoughts were summarized by Keith Ferrazzi in the book, Never Eat Alone. So think about that. Connections are meant to mean more than a follow might mean on Instagram or Twitter. So be conscious of who you're including in your network because they are a representation of you as a professional. So, I've got to ask you again, what's your personal promise? Whether it's personal in terms of how you're acting or who you're associating yourself with, think to yourself and ask yourself, what's your personal promise? The world tells us that it's all about who you know, but you can't forget the value and how well your network knows you. As members of this increasingly digital age, it's important that we value the interactions and the interpersonal relationships that we have with one another and being genuine along the way. If people don't care what you know until they know you care, how do you prove it to them? You open yourself up, and ideally, you started yesterday. So I went to a big public high school. It was 2,200 kids, and I made myself available to a lot of them. I did it with these. Now, I was fully aware that having a business card as a high schooler was very unconventional. I quickly also learned that they're not necessarily good for dating, considering my numbers on the back, but I found other ways to use them. One of which was just giving my phone number to people I already knew in a funny way, in a different way. It was different than getting lost in the digital phone book that a lot of us have, right? It was tangible, and that's what made it different. So after a few years, though, I began to feel the unintended value that they ended up having. It was 2 years after graduation, after high school graduation, I got a call from a classmate that I hadn't spoken to since. They called me, asked for a few minutes of my time. We started talking, and it became apparent that they were going through a tough time, a time when personal and relationship struggles were really adding up for them. I then got a call a few weeks later. It was from the same individual, calling me just to thank me, thanking me for the time that I offered them and how helpful it was to them. I didn't realize the meaning that this call had had to that individual, the meaningful impact that this conversation had. Building deeper relationships these days is harder and harder than ever. And oftentimes, it's tough to open up about personal struggle with people that you've known very closely for many years. The thing is, though, is that in this situation, I didn't do anything exceptional. I did two things that any of you guys in this room could do. The first is be a genuine resource or an outlet for the people around you, the people you interact with, the people that you relate to. And the second was listen. All I had to do was listen. I encourage you all to meet new people because you want to, not because you need to. Ask them about their story because we all have one. And with regard to the aforementioned stories, curb your egoism and be genuine in how you act, regardless of what your desired outcome might be, because ultimately you want to be in control of your own personal brand. And so tonight, I want you all to go home, look in the mirror, and ask yourself this. How are you going to treat the next person you meet, even if you know that they have nothing to offer you? Thank you all for listening.